Petta, directed by Karthik Subbaraj, starring superstar Rajini Kanth, Vijay Sethupathi, Nawazin Siddique, Simran, and in a cameo-like appearance, Trisha. Karthik Subbaraj's Petta is essentially two films. In the first half, you have a Rajinikanth film, and in the second half, you have a Karthik Subbaraj film. What I mean to say is, the first half is is the kind of film that Karthik Subbaraj promised in his pre-release interviews and promotional events. A film which brings back the 90s Rajinikanth, who's playful, who is completely morally good, and is a character who has a really has a flashback where he is kind of put into this as a flashback where he's betrayed or smacked down by the villain, and after which he's trying to run away, but the villain kind of pursues him and brings back that anger, and the hero goes after the villain and takes revenge and you know what. So this is what we get in the first half of the film. The second half is more of a Karthik Subbaraj film in terms of it being a morally grey universe, where you don't have a completely white character like an MGR or a completely black character like an Nambiar. The characters are both. They have shades of grey. So these Karthik Subbaraj as a director established himself through films like Pizza, Jigardanda, and Iraivi. All of these things have grey characters and grey universes. Especially Jigardanda, the whole point of the film is to show that neither the hero or nor the villain, especially Jigardanda, the whole point of the film is to show how the hero takes the villain's place and the villain takes the hero's place. And that's a spoiler, by the way, if you haven't seen Jigardanda. So in the second half of Petta, you get a more Karthik Subbaraj film where we see Rajinikanth, who's named Kali after his Mullumadalam character, where he also states this iconic line saying "Romba ketta paiyan sir in the Kali," which means Kali is a really bad dude. So that's what we get in the second half. We get a really we get a Rajinikanth with shades of grey. He comes up with a cunning plan to take on the villain. And when we get to know what that plan is by the last couple of minutes of the film, I was mind blown, and many people were really taken aback. Considering it's been like a really long time since like the film Petta released, I guess it's okay to talk more on that. So, apart from that, talking about Petta, like whether it's worth your watch, I definitely think it is. It is kind of a film which caters to. It's a very interesting film in terms of it being two films. Like the first half of the film is essentially a film for Rajinikanth fans and people who have seen this man grow during the 90s. The time when he became the superstar he is today from a normal star. So 90s was a time when Rajinikanth became a superstar from which he is today from a normal star. So, and that film and the first half of Petta is such a kind of a film which came in the 90s. However, the second half transitions to the Karthik Subbaraj films, and the way it transitions is the issue with the film. We don't get, if the film was similar to first half, I think it is really necessary to kind of rate a film basing on like what the film sets out to do. Not every film is a serious film, not every film is comical, so you can't compare such two films. So whenever you come up with a whether you think on those terms whether a film was worth the watch, or the film is really good or not, it should be based on whether the film achieves what it sets out to do. And in this case not so really, because the film, whatever Petta sets out to do in the first 10 minutes of the film, ends by the first half, and it does a good job in that. And whatever the film establishes in the second, the first 10 minutes of the second of the film does a really good job of achieving that in the second half. But when you ask the question whether the film does a good job of achieving at the end of the film what it established in the first 10 minutes of the film, not so really, because they're two different films. So I think that's where people would find a problem with, like certain, you know if at all you have a problem with it, or else if you're a person who don't really care about that, if you're a person who don't really care about them, so if you're a person who really doesn't care about that, then I don't think you should be having a problem with that. So the and regarding other problems of the film, you like I told earlier, you get a cameo kind of an appearance from Trisha, and even the role played by Simran is not so really great, considering Simran told that it was her comeback film, and this is what she would call a comeback. And in the way Petta is different from a film like like iconic films of Rajini Kanth like a Basha and Annamalai or a Padayappa, is that the antagonist or the situation that the hero is pushed down to is not so really great, with an exception of Kabali and Kala, that the hero would triumph in the end. He would come out as the as the winner, as the victor. So that was never a question. But then in films like Basha and Annamalai, you really feel that punch, emotional punch, when Rajinikanth goes down, like in the middle of the film. You really give a shit about like the character. But then here, not so really, because the film is an open tribute to Rajinikanth, and then at no place establishes Rajinikanth to be in a bad position. Rajinikanth at any time is really, is very self-confident. He never really, feels that he's been beaten down by the Rajinikanth. At no point feels that he's beaten down by the villain, and even though they show that, even though they try to show that, it never really, kind of comes out of the film and reaches the audience. So that is kind of the one of the most important drawbacks of the film, I think. If you have seen the trailer of the film, you know that if you have seen the trailer of the film, you should be knowing that there's a flashback, and in the flashback, the dubbing and the sync of Nawazin Siddiqui's character was really horrible, to say the least. And however, that wasn't the case in the present time of the film, where like it was fine. So I so so it somehow felt like the flashback portion of the film was rushed, but then I really enjoyed the like whatever the film sets out to do in the first half and the second half. If in the first half it was a Rajinikanth film, and you're trying to bring back all the playfulness and jokes and mass moments from Rajinikanth's 90s era, the film did a really good job, and I really enjoyed. And it's also important to say that the man Rajinikanth has done a really good job with his dancing sequences, which were never really great at any point of time, but then this film looks kind of better. And also talking about the action sequences, all credit goes to Peter Hain, who did a fantabulous job, I felt. And in the coming back to the second half, I would have, as a person, as a personal opinion, I would have preferred a film which was entirely, like more of a Karthik Subbaraj film, like it was in the second half. But then, like Karthik Subbaraj, I think we took a really interesting way, to kind of balance, both, satisfy both. I think Karthik Subbaraj took a really interesting way to satisfy both his fans and that of the larger star, Rajinikanth. Whether if the film is worth a watch, I think it is, and I think maybe it's even worth a second viewing for the film establishes a lot of these metaphors with using Christian symbols and addressing really political addressing the really political. I think the film is also worth a second watch for people who wants to pick on the metaphors, all the biblical references in the film, which Karthik Subbaraj which is a constant in any of Karthik Subaraj's film, and other the statements that the film make about the current political situation. And for people who wants to see the film as something as a political statement made by Rajinikanth, considering he has announced his interest in politics, that can also work. So yeah, the prob so Petta is a really good. Petta is a really interesting concoction between Rajinikanth and Karthik Subaraj sensibilities, and hope you like it.